odds on weather underground too. So
Once in a while.
They're good
when the spirit moves me.
Right.
Good afternoon. I've been retired now for over 3 years. In the heavy rain in eastern Texas, along the western Gulf and the central Gulf. Maybe I'm getting crotchety in my old age. You know, I just sit around and wait for people to say something wrong, but I actually don't think so. It's the kind of bad meteorology that lends the impression that you don't understand basic scientific principles, and that's what always bothers me. Not that I haven't said or written silly things over the years. I have. So I cast this stone knowing full well that I'm guilty. We'll start with the precipitation analysis. This 7-day total from the 21st to the 28th. I guess the 21st was about the time when the models were starting to pick up Hurricane Patricia, around there. I can't remember exactly. And as you can see, I mean, you don't need me to interpret that. There were places in eastern Texas with over 20 inches of rain. It's my contention that these rains would have occurred regardless of whether the remnants of Hurricane Patricia were around, and I'll try to shed some light on that as we go. But I mean, it's a pretty good rain event, and as it turns out, tomorrow there's going to be, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Tomorrow there's going to be another round of heavy rain in kind of the same area. So I mean, they're getting a 1-2 punch here. I got this as off guard. Thank you, Art. I had been trying to generate precipitable water, and I just thought I was doing it wrong, but whatever you did fixed it. Thank you. Precipitable water, basically grab a column of air and take all the water vapor in that column and force it down to the surface as rain, and this is the kind of analysis you'll get. It's in inches, at least this analysis is. So what color is that? Red, brown, whatever. Greater than 2.5. The colors sort of mask the boundaries here, but here's the western tip of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and you can see a plume of very high PWs coming in off the Gulf of Mexico, separate from the area which is down in here where Hurricane Patricia ultimately made landfall. I think it made landfall just before 0Z on the 24th. So this is about the time when Patricia made landfall. So clearly these plumes of high PW air are separated by this little elongated minimum here, and it just so happens that corresponds to mountains on the order of 2,000 to 4,000 meters high. Hello, Steve. Did John Neese come? Is John here? There. Hey, John. See, I'm so flabbergasted I lost my train of thought. You ram moisture into mountains 2,000 to 4,000 meters tall. Typically rains out before it gets to the other side. So this is a animated GIF that I made, and you can see basically it's a 3-day period. It'll start over here in a minute. Here's where Patricia made landfall, and at no time is there a connection between high PW air from the eastern Pacific and what was going on in East Texas, the Western Gulf, and the Central Gulf. And so why do I make this point? I mean, obviously the plume coming off the Gulf of Mexico was sufficient to cause heavy rain in concert with a couple of cold fronts and cyclogenesis along the Gulf Coast, and perhaps the remnants of Patricia's circulation played a small role in that cyclogenesis. But for the most part, while I was listening to people on TV talking about the remnants of Hurricane Patricia causing all this heavy rain, for all practical purposes, Hurricane Patricia had dissipated. And so my contention is that these rains would have occurred had Patricia not been there. Now, to be fair, I think there were some contributions from Patricia. These were the cold fronts that I was referring to. The plume of high PW air coming off the Gulf of Mexico, obviously not shown here, being lifted by these fronts, and of course the baroclinic zone, the area of horizontal temperature contrast, setting the stage for cyclogenesis, and we'll show that in a minute. Here's the 0915 on the 24th, the surface analysis I just showed you, I should have said was 09Z on the 24th. So the surface analysis and the radar go hand in hand, and there's some pretty good showers and heavy rain and thunderstorms with the front, some starting to develop here more farther east. Here is the infrared satellite image of Mexico, the Eastern Pacific, and the Gulf of Mexico. This little swirl right here are in fact the remnants of Hurricane Patricia. There are some high clouds spewing off over eastern Texas. No doubt that they're above 700 millibars, 600 millibars. Some of the moisture streaming off of Hurricane Patricia was contributing to the PWs that I showed you, but not much. Probably you could even argue that some of the ice crystals in the cirrus clouds spewing off of Hurricane Patricia were falling into the rain clouds and helping to seed the rain clouds and thereby enhancing rainfall. But the casual explanation for the heavy rains in eastern Texas and the western and central Gulf states being, quote, moisture from Hurricane Patricia was edit blank. Not very good. Yes?
What was the cause for that most pretty said? They looked at the isobars who showed it could look like that rate of flow effect, 5% super wet.
Well, it was super. I mean, I think Brownsville at one time, I want to get this right, I think the precipitable water at one point over Brownsville was like 2.75 inches, which was some ungodly 300% of normal. And by the way, precipitable water is not necessarily a measure of the maximum rainfall. I mean, after you make all the water vapor rain out, you can replenish the column with advection or convergence or whatever. But I'll try to answer your question, George, as we go on. So I guess the moral of the story here is I'm not saying that Hurricane Patricia had nothing to do with what happened in eastern Texas and the western Gulf, but I think its role was minimal, and certainly not in the vein that some of the TV weathercasters that I saw who just waved their hand and said moisture from Hurricane Patricia. This is the animated GIF of 500 millibar heights and 500 millibar absolute vorticity from 0Z on the 24th around landfall of Patricia and up until the 27th when the rain had moved farther east. You can see right there is the circulation, mid-level circulation of Patricia, and watch it as it goes over the mountain. It takes a hit, a huge hit. And you'd have to look very, I'll wait till this starts again, so if I can, you can follow it as it approaches the lower Rio Grande, maybe that's there, and it starts to interact with other vorticity maxima associated with this sort of flabby trough that emerged from the desert southwest. And as I pointed out before with the surface analysis, there was a baroclinic zone there, an area of horizontal temperature contrast. And those vorticity maxima and perhaps the remnant mid-level circulation of Patricia helped to spark cyclogenesis. And in fact, this enhancement that you see in the absolute vorticity, I think, is the footprint of cyclogenesis and cold advection behind the developing low along the Gulf Coast, along the fronts along the Gulf Coast. And there was the low. There was the low right around its deepest central pressure, but it's difficult for me to say whether or not cyclogenesis would have occurred had Patricia's remnant circulation not been involved, but I think it played a minor role. So how long do I get?
So about
One. So that's my pet peeve. Yes, George.
Also, one other thing. Used to the old synopticians talking a lot about getting a lot more bang for your shortwave talking have a near neutral troposphere. That you get a lot more cyclogenesis and do so. In that case, I'm wondering if Patricia contributed twice adiabatic upper troposphere. And that had more of a role. The shortwave was nothing to write home about.
Right.
The rollable jet was certainly nothing to write home about. The humidity was. And out of one good factor, you get another large area from the heavy rain. Seems like that role is one other helpful factor. And unlike you, I don't really think that upper level circulation played much of a role.
No.
I'm wondering if it was the upper half of the troposphere.
That's an interesting question.
Near neutral is the lower half. That you had a Gulf tropical layer coming in under a Pacific tropical layer, and suddenly there was no real hindrance to vertical motion anywhere over these fences.
That's feasible, and that, and I would add to that the idea of the cedar feeder kind of effect from the plume of high moisture. So yeah, I think that's reasonable. But it's clear that the takeaway is that the robust moisture that caused the heavy rains in eastern Texas and the western central Gulf Coast were all low-level stuff off the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah. That's the takeaway. Just sort of a broad brush big picture look at what's going on over North America. A big ridge, big subtropical ridge off the west coast of North America, pretty much zonal flow coming into North America, largely a Pacific air mass governing most of North America. To the east of this subtropical ridge, there's a weakness and a trough that's starting to eject out of the southwest, and it's this trough as it moves farther eastward that's going to give some of the places that were doused by heavy rains last week another round. And of course, we've got our own little frontal system that moved through. There's the upper level low. I'll give you another perspective on this in a minute. That's going to be lifting out. And with the exception of a couple of these troughs sort of ejecting out of the southwest next week, next week, and particularly later next week, we get into a rather mild pattern. This is these are 850 millibar wind barbs, 850 millibar heights, and the color stuff is our contours of precipitable water. And as the trough that I mentioned to the east of the subtropical ridge and that little weakness, you can see the return flow starting to get organized here on along the eastern Gulf of Mexico. And if you look really closely, I think in that last frame there are a couple of 50-knot winds at 850 millibars. So a nice low-level jet stream and major league moisture convergence setting up over parts of the western Gulf states tomorrow and into tomorrow evening. And indeed, what my eyesight is getting bad. Maybe I should sit out there and get up and point. Looks like eastern Texas into Arkansas. It is that red. So we're talking another at least 2 to 3 inches of rain with that low-level jet stream coming out of the western Gulf of Mexico and that short wave ejecting from the southwest. Big time onshore flow in the Pacific Northwest. They've actually been fairly dry for a while, and they're going to, at least the Washington and Northern Oregon mountains, the Olympics and the Cascades are going to get a pretty healthy dose of precipitation. Closer to home, did everyone hear the rain last night? Yeah, it was. My dog Mac went absolutely berserk when it started raining. Usually he reserves howling. He's part Beagle. He reserves howling for thunder, but it was just unbelievably heavy and noisy. So what was I saying about the weather? I was talking about my dog. So we're having the fronts move through. I was hoping that the satellite loop would still be up, but that's okay. Again, the 500 millibar footprint of the cold air that's moving into the northeast, the closed low situated over the Great Lakes. There it is at 18Z this afternoon. Pretty good lobe of absolute vorticity hanging down into the Ohio Valley. I imagine for some of you 411 students, there's certainly some curvature vorticity, but lots of shear. I see I see 85 knots at 500 millibars. If my eyesight is so, it's pretty well screaming. Probably not going to be much in the way of showers, at least around these parts. But I guess closer to the eastern Great Lakes, you could get some light precipitation with this rolling through. At 8:50. This is also valid at 18Z this morning. Some cold advection at 8:50. The 0 degree Celsius line is in northwestern Pennsylvania, so it's relatively unstable, and certainly the gradient of the 850 millibar heights is relatively high. So if we could transfer some of the momentum down from 850 millibars this afternoon, we might get some pretty good winds. So I looked at the I looked at the rapid refresh. Oh my, time flies. Rapid refresh soundings. You can see they go through. This is from the 9Z run. I got up early this morning and did all this, and you can see. There we go. There's the morning. Starting to dry out in the mid-levels, still some low clouds around, and then it starts drying in the low levels, and you're starting to get breaks. We actually started earlier in the day. And then you can see towards the end, we get a fairly deep, well-mixed layer. So at 18Z, the rapid refresh sounding for University Park from the 9Z run showed the temperature sounding basically dry adiabatic almost up to say 820, 830 millibars. So anytime you see a dry adiabatic lapse rate, you know that the boundary layer is well mixed, and so convective eddies are going to not only mix air upward, they're going to mix air downward. And if you look over here, I have more eyesight problems, but around 825 millibars, I'm seeing 35, I don't know, 38, in the vicinity of 40 knots. So usually in the olden days, I used to look in a well-mixed boundary layer situation, I used to look at 850 millibars to get an idea of the maximum wind gust. If you wanted to get an idea of the maximum wind speed, just sort of add up the predicted wind speeds at various levels within the well-mixed boundary level and average them, basically, just to get an idea. So it could be windy this afternoon. I think Cleveland had a gust to 38 earlier in the day, so we'll see. I'm not planning to go out cycling today. I'm too old to confront winds like that. Looking ahead, in the 2 minutes I have left, the 500 millibar low that was associated with the cold fronts that are moving through. The last cold front, by the way, is the one that, quote, means business, but it's not serious business. Lifts out. Here comes that trough that I was talking about in the southwest on the east, in the weakness on the eastern side of the subtropical ridge. And then on towards Sunday, there's some vorticity maxima that start to get ejected our way. So I guess Saturday looks okay. I'm condensing things now so I can get done. I'd imagine, I haven't looked at the 12Z run yet, that there might be an opportunity for some showers on Sunday, but I certainly wouldn't call it a rainy day, at least at this point. The interesting thing about, as this runs through, you can see once this low lifts out, notice that the 500 millibar heights start to build a little bit. And that building of 500 millibar heights behind an ejecting shortwave is going to be the story for next week. I don't have time to do Moss. I have 2 minutes. You're not going to. The temperatures are going to be near or slightly below average for the next couple of days. It's no big deal. Well, I was going to North America, GFS. See you, John. Where's 500 millibar heights and vorticity?
You scroll over, need more.
I need more. Thank you. There it is. You know what? I'm running out of time. We had the subtropical ridge in the eastern Pacific. Weakness to the east. Trough digging in, ejecting outward. Behind the trough over the weekend, the heights start to build. and we don't really get all that warm. But next week, a wave comes out, does a similar thing. The heights really build, and towards the end of next week, it gets quite warm. This is the European Ensemble. Everybody know what an ensemble is? Tweak the initial conditions. You get an ensemble member. I think, what are there, 50, 51, something like that in this. This was the anomaly from the European Ensemble for this week, basically, very near normal. The other takeaway from Lee's weather briefing today is that next week will be biking weather. It starts to warm up. I thought I saw a little interruption of the warm-up next week. 850 millibar temperatures come down a little bit, but not drastically. So it's not a surge of warmth. So it starts to get warm, then sort of tampers down a little bit, and then I think towards the end of next week it gets really warm. And Lee will be very happy. You'll be studying, and I'll be out riding my bike. Are there any questions?
Last questions? All right, thank you, Lee. Next week will be LED.
Ooh.